Since he crossed the personal line, he's not gonna have my respect. He's not gonna have my team's respect. All I'm gonna need is 2 minutes in the octagon with you. Then I'm gonna put you to sleep in front of your whole family, your country, in front of everyone. My name is Ilia Topuria. I'm a professional athlete. That I'm the best. I'm the best fighter in the world.
Ilia Topuria just announced his retirement from the UFC. Not after a long career, not after his body finally gave out, after one loss, his first loss, ever. And the way it happened, the circumstances, the stage, the man who did it, what Topuria said afterward, is the kind of story that only exists in combat sports. The kind you could not write if you tried. 18 months ago, this man was untouchable, undefeated. 2 belts. He had finished Alexander Volkanovski twice and then went up a weight class and dismantled Max Holloway. He was not just a champion. He was being discussed as a generational talent in the same breath as the greatest fighters this sport has ever produced. He walked into fight night so confident he built a casket for his opponent, placed a white rose on it, showed up to the final press conference, shoved Gaethje on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in front of the entire world, and told everyone the ending was already written. He got knocked out in front of Donald Trump, and 3 days later, he retired. At 28 years old, with 1 loss on his record, gone. This is the full story of how the most confident man in MMA built his own ending without realizing it, and what he said when it was all over.
Go for the win. And I think that was the choice he had to make because it was going to continue to get worse. I beat his ass in the first round. Like, it might have been close on the scorecards. I absolutely took the first round, but the amount of damage that I inflicted in the first round set up the rest of the fight.
You have to understand what UFC 317 actually was before we get into what happened inside that cage. This was not a regular title defense. This was not a routine main event. This was the UFC staging a major championship fight at a venue specifically chosen to carry political and historical weight, with a sitting president in attendance and the entire world watching. Topuria came in at 17-0. He had not just won the featherweight title, he had finished Alexander Volkanovski, one of the greatest featherweights in the history of the sport, twice, back-to-back. He had since moved up to lightweight, demolished Max Holloway for that title too, and returned to featherweight still holding both. He was operating at a level that made analysts genuinely uncomfortable describing, because the words available did not feel big enough. Gaethje was the mandatory challenger, a former interim lightweight champion, a man who had shared the cage with Khabib Nurmagomedov, Tony Ferguson, Charles Oliveira, and Justin Poirier. A man who had been finished and had finished others at the highest level. Nobody gave him much of a shot. The odds reflected that. The commentary surrounding the fight reflected that. Even the casual fan base treated this as a question of when Topuria would finish him, not if. That is the backdrop for everything that follows. How this fight got built, and how ugly it got before the bell. The animosity between Topuria and Gaethje was not manufactured by a PR team. It was real, it was personal, and it escalated at every single public moment they shared. It started at the original kickoff press conference a month before the fight. Topuria and Gaethje were already clashing. Words exchanged, energy in the room immediately hostile. But Gaethje took it somewhere personal quickly. He publicly called Topuria a gimmick. Not a fighter, not a champion. A gimmick. A performance, something assembled for cameras rather than built for cages. And then, unprompted, Gaethje went after Topuria's divorce. In front of cameras and reporters, he said, and this is a direct quote, "I understand why anybody would leave him." That was the moment the temperature in this rivalry went from heated to genuinely dangerous. Topuria's response was not verbal. It came in the form of that casket stunt, a prop funeral, a white rose placed on a box bearing Gaethje's likeness, staged for maximum humiliation. The message was clear. This is not a competition. This is an ending. And I am the one holding the flower. Things came to a head at the final pre-fight press conference, held on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. That location alone should have been a signal that everyone involved wanted this moment to feel historic. What nobody expected was that it would become chaotic. During the face-off, Topuria shoved Gaethje, not a tap, a shove, visible enough that Dana White's reaction, caught on camera, was immediate dismay. The UFC had spent significant resources organizing a high-profile press conference at a national monument, and their champion was shoving his opponent in front of everyone. Gaethje, to his credit, did not escalate physically, but he did not stay quiet. He looked at the view, the Lincoln Memorial behind him, the National Mall spread out, and said, "Look at this beautiful view when you want to act like a fucking animal." He called Topuria an emotional little animal. Topuria later explained his reasoning. He said he had warned Gaethje not to come closer. When Gaethje essentially dared him to throw a punch, Topuria made a calculated decision. A full punch could have gotten Gaethje pulled from the fight by the commission. A shove would not. So he shoved. Whether you read that as restraint or provocation depends on which fighter you're rooting for. And just when you thought the circus could not get more crowded, heavyweight Josh Hokett, who was not even on the same weight class portion of the card, decided to use the shared stage to fire a shot at Topuria's height. Standing next to him, Hokett joked that Topuria was so short he can't see himself in the bathroom mirror.
He's so short he can't see himself in the bathroom mirror, and he married a stripper from Miami. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The incredible Hoagie.
The crowd loved it. Topuria did not. By the time fight night arrived, Ilia Topuria had spent weeks telling the world that Justin Gaethje was already dead. He had a casket made, he placed flowers on it, he shoved his opponent at a national landmark. He had absorbed every insult, every personal jab, every size joke, and he had channeled all of it into absolute certainty that Saturday night would end with Gaethje's career in ruins. He had never been more sure of anything in his fighting life. The fight, the opening round, was deceptive in the worst possible way for Topuria. He came out moving well, establishing range, looking relaxed, the way champions look when they believe the outcome is already decided. Gaethje was cautious, probing, unwilling to overcommit early. The early exchanges told you how Topuria wanted the fight to go. Controlled pressure, sharp counters, the kind of calculated aggression that had dismantled world-class fighters before. And for stretches of that first round, it worked. Topuria landed clean. He looked fast, he looked dangerous. He looked exactly like the fighter the world expected him to be. This is the hinge moment of the entire contest. Midway through round 2, Gaethje landed a right hand that snapped Topuria's head back. Not a finisher, not a moment that stopped the fight, but it was the first time all night that Topuria looked visibly affected. And more importantly, it was the moment that told Gaethje something the rest of the world had not yet registered. Topuria was hittable tonight. More hittable than he had been in any of his previous title fights. Gaethje, who built his career on absorbing punishment and finding a way to keep walking forward, did not waste the information. The damage accumulation phase of this fight happened quietly and then suddenly. Topuria landed, but so did Gaethje. And while Topuria was accustomed to opponents wilting under his output, Gaethje was not wilting. He was calculating. He was waiting for the pattern he needed. It came late in round 2. Topuria loaded up on a combination, the kind of aggressive sequence he had used to finish opponents throughout his career. Gaethje timed it. He stepped in behind a straight right hand that landed flush on the button, and Topuria went down. Not stumble, not drop to one knee. Went down. The referee stopped it seconds later. No recovery window. No dramatic scramble to the fence. Ilia Topuria, 17-0, undefeated featherweight and lightweight champion of the world, was unconscious on the canvas in front of a sitting U.S. president and thousands of people who had genuinely believed they were there to watch a coronation. Justin Gaethje had just ended the most dominant run in recent UFC history. The revelation. Now here's where things get more complicated than anyone had time to process before the next wave hit. Not just the loss. Everyone processes a loss eventually. Something more permanent. 3 days after the fight, Topuria broke his silence. He did not do it through a press release. He did not do it through his management. He went directly to his platform, directly to his audience, and said exactly what was on his mind. He said, "I came into this sport to prove something. I've proved it, and I am not willing to give this sport the version of me that chases ghosts." Let that sink in. He was not announcing a rematch. He was not calling for immediate redemption. He was announcing his retirement from the UFC at 28 years old, with a record of 17-1, after his first professional loss in the sport's biggest organization. on the biggest possible stage. The MMA world stopped, because this is not how this script is supposed to go. The blueprint, the one every combat sports narrative runs on, is that the undefeated champion loses, goes through a public reckoning, rebuilds, and returns. The story demands it. The audience expects it. The money demands it. Even the fighter's own ego usually demands it. Topuria did not follow the blueprint. And what makes the announcement hit harder than almost anything he said in the lead up to the fight is what he did not say. He did not blame Gaethje. He did not talk about rematches. He did not say the word robbery. He did not manufacture an excuse. He simply said that the version of himself that needed to fight was the version that needed to prove something. And that version, in his words, no longer exists. That is either the most self-aware thing a fighter has ever said after a knockout loss, or it is a statement written in the immediate rawness of one of the most humiliating nights of his career. Possibly both. Probably both. The evidence. The reactions came fast, and they came from every direction. Gaethje, asked about the retirement announcement, was characteristically direct. He said, "If that's what he wants, I respect it. But I think he's going to change his mind when the adrenaline wears off and the belt starts calling." That one sentence, that is the whole story of this rivalry right there. Even in his moment of victory, Gaethje is not celebrating so much as he is watching, waiting for the next chapter. Topuria's own team has remained largely quiet, which is notable. In the weeks leading up to the fight, his camp was vocal, confident, and constantly feeding material to the media. The silence that followed the retirement announcement has spoken louder than anything they put out during fight week. Here is something you have to understand about Topuria's numbers going into that fight. He had finished every single one of his UFC opponents, 14 fights in the organization. Think about what that means. Not a single one of those men made it to a decision. Not one of them was able to outlast him. That finishing rate does not exist in the lightweight or featherweight divisions. It barely exists in any division at any level. That is a fact that will live in the record books regardless of how this chapter ends. And yet none of those finishes prepared him for what Gaethje brought into that cage. The refrain here is what you actually watched on fight night. Not an upset, not a fluke, not a bad night in the office for a great champion. What you watched was the oldest story in combat sports, wearing a brand new costume. The surface level reading is that Topuria got caught, got overconfident, fell in love with the villain role, got lost in the casket stunt in the Lincoln Memorial shove in the trash talk, and showed up mentally compromised against a man who had nothing to lose and everything to prove. But here is what was actually happening. Gaethje had been building this specific performance for months, not just training. He knew how Topuria loaded on combinations. He knew when Topuria committed. Every piece of trash talk that Topuria launched, every provocation at every press conference, was information. It told Gaethje exactly how emotional Topuria was, exactly how personally invested he had become in the performance of being unbeatable. And emotionally invested fighters make split-second decisions based on ego, not game plan. They overload. They go for the finish one sequence too early. They mistake aggression for dominance. Gaethje, the man everyone dismissed, the man Topuria essentially held a funeral for, walked into that cage colder and clearer than anyone gave him credit for being. That white rose Topuria placed on the casket, in the end, it said more about Topuria's emotional state than Gaethje's vulnerability. And Gaethje knew it. He used it. That is not luck. That is the most underrated skill in fighting, making your opponent perform rather than compete. What comes next? So where does Ilia Topuria go from here? The retirement, if it holds, is one of the most stunning exits in UFC history. A 28-year-old two-division champion walking away after his first loss, without a rematch clause invoked, without a public breakdown, without the usual machinery of "I'll be back stronger." If he means it, he joins a very short list of fighters who left before the sport finished them, which is a list almost every fighter in history would have chosen to be on. But almost none of them actually made it to. The other path is obvious and has precedent written all over it. Fighters say they're done in the aftermath of devastating losses all the time. The emotion is real. The intention is real. And then 6 months pass, the body heals, the ego recalibrates, and the phone starts ringing with numbers that make a rematch feel like destiny rather than desperation. Gaethje holds the belt now. The belt Topuria built his identity around, the belt he was supposed to defend before an incumbent president. There is also a third factor nobody is discussing yet, and it matters. Topuria has never been in this position before. He has never had to come back from anything. Every setback in his career happened before the UFC, before the title, before the cameras made every moment permanent. He built his entire brand around invincibility. He does not know, and nobody around him knows, what version of Ilia Topuria exists on the other side of a knockout loss. That casket he built for Gaethje, the one he put the white rose on, the one that was supposed to symbolize an ending, he built it for the wrong man. Topuria's road from here will be longer than he wants, longer than his ego will accept, and far more uncertain than anything he mapped out walking into fight week. But everything he has ever done in this sport has been the hard way, the defiant way, the way that required the world to be wrong about him first. And whatever comes next, retirement or return, he will not accept any story that does not end on his terms. The only question is whether those terms still include the cage.